Good afternoon, and welcome to the Biddeford Parsonage Museum and afternoon readings from LM Montgomery's short story collection. This afternoon we're going to be reading The Adventures of a Story by LM Montgomery. On my right, Rebekah Brown will be reading the part of Polly, and Rachel Reeves will be reading the part of Prue. And I will be your narrator, Roger Moore.
Polly,
said Prue, looking up from the magazine she was reading. She should have been studying botany.
I'm going to write a story.
A story? Oh, Prue, what a splendid idea,
said Polly, who was translating Virgil and eating chocolate creams at the same time, taking a bite and a sentence in steady alteration.
Do you really think I can?
asked Prue a little doubtfully.
Why, of course you can,
returned Polly promptly.
Dear me, Prue, if I could write as well as you did, I'd be writing all the time. Didn't Professor Allen say that your essay on Brian last week was one of the best he had ever written in class? What will your story be about? Where will you send it? How much do you think you'll get for it?
I don't know exactly what it will be about,
answered Prue, taking these breathless questions in calm detail.
I'll think about the plot after I go to bed. Of course, it will be a juvenile story. I won't attempt anything for older readers just yet. And I think I'll send it to Sunny Hours. I'm sure I can write as good as a story as those I've been reading here. The editor pays $3 a story, I believe. Just think, Polly, if I get $3 for mine, what a celebration we'll have here in Poverty Flat.
And just imagine how lovely it will be to have your story in print with your name all over it,
sighed Polly, to whom this aspect of the matter appealed more than the pecuniary one.
Will you sign your own name or a nom de plume?
I don't know,
said Prue, nibbling the end of her pencil.
Prue Stewart doesn't sound very literary somehow, does it? And Prudence is worse still. How would it do just to sign P.L. Stewart?
Polly thought that it would do nicely, and she considered the solution of the question an added proof of Prue's cleverness.
You will let me read it once you have it written, won't you?
she asked.
Oh, of course,
said Prue graciously.
And you must criticize it freely, too. If you see faults in it, you must tell me of them plainly.
It must be splendid to be able to write,
said Polly admiringly.
And the next best thing is to have a friend who can. Just think of how proud I'll be, Prue, to speak of my dearest friend, the young and clever writer, Miss Prue Stewart, P.L. Stewart. I will shine with the kind of reflection glory you'll see.
Well,
said Prue with a big sigh, as she folded her magazine and tucked it away under a big Greek lexicon.
I suppose I must get to work at my studies. You are nearly through yours, and I haven't looked at a lesson. It is all the fault of those Sunny Hour stories. They were so interesting I couldn't leave them. I wonder if anyone will neglect her lessons to read mine when it is published.
Prue Stewart and Polly Shatford were high school students studying to fit themselves for teachers. They roomed together and were sure that they had the jolliest times of any two girls in the world. Polly was a steady, systematic student, and in this respect had the advantage of the more brilliant Prue, who was too much given to daydreaming and could be lured from her studies at any time by the fascinations of a storybook or a magazine. Prue had a knack of expression and wrote good, clear English. Her school compositions had always been considered very clever, and the praise of teachers and friends had given her the idea that she had talent. She intended to be a great writer someday, and this story should be, she resolved, the beginning of a brilliant career. This, at least, was the thread on which Prue's rambling thoughts were strung, while she vainly tried to fix her attention on her Virgil. In the morning, she announced that she had thought out the plot of her story, and she sketched the outline for Polly while they dressed.
The heroine's name will be Marjorie. That is my favorite name, and I intend to draw her character and looks from you, Polly. I think I shall call the story Marjorie's Mistakes. That sounds nice and alliterative. I lay awake half the night making up the plot, and I feel so stupid this morning that I'll believe I'll forget everything in class.
During the next week, Prue's story grew apace. She wrote and rewrote, scratched out, interpointed, and revised. Polly thought it all so interesting just to see Prue scribbling away furiously on the study table with a frowning brow and inky fingers, or else throwing down her pen and striding dramatically about the room while she dived into the depths of her imagination for an elusive word or phrase. All this gave Polly what she called a literary thrill. But at last the story was finished, and Prue read it to Polly. Polly thought it was splendid and said so.
It's just as good as any story I've written in Sunny Hours. And the editors will be sure to take it, and most likely he'll ask you for more. It ends up so nicely, too. I do like a story that ends up nicely.
I'm glad you like it,
said Prue.
Now I'm going to copy it out neatly and send it right off.
The manuscript was duly written and mailed with stamps for return if unavailable, although Polly thought that was a quite unnecessary precaution. They agreed that they need not expect an answer before the end of 3 weeks, but only 1 week had passed when a plump, oblong envelope addressed to Miss P.L. Stewart was left at the boarding house. Prue turned quite pale as she opened it. There lay her story, rather mussed and crumpled, and with it a cool little printed slip stating that the editor had carefully examined the story of Marjorie's mistake and regretted that it was not available for use in Sunny Hours.
You don't mean that they've say to send it back?
Cried Polly, doubting the evidence of her eyes.
Well, that editor must be crazy to decline a splendid story like that when he has printed hundreds that weren't half as good.
Prue read the slip with a little quiver of her lips. It was a bitter disappointment to her, for she had been so sure that her story would be accepted. Her pride was deeply hurt too, and she thought some very cutting things about that editor.
You must send it elsewhere,
said Polly, patting the disdained manuscript gently as if she wished to soothe its feelings.
Of course I will,
said Prue resolutely.
After all, I suppose I couldn't expect to have my first story accepted right away. All writers get them back at times. I'll send it to the girls' treasury, and if they take it, I'll send that Sunny Hours editor a marked copy.
So, to the girls' treasury went the story, and back it also came from them with commendable promptness.
I can't think what has gotten into all of these editors,
said Polly in a tone that implied her belief in their utter degeneracy. But Prue only set her lips a little more firmly and sent her story to a third publication.
I shall simply keep sending it until it is accepted,
she said. By the time it reached its 6th rejection, Prue had recovered from her disappointment, and her wounded pride had so entirely healed that she began to see the funny side of it. Polly really took it harder than Prue did, but in time she too became philosophical and treated the matter as a standing joke. Prue made out an alphabetical list of juvenile publications and said that she intended to send Marjorie's Mistake to every one in turn.
When I get to Y, I'll stop, because there are no more after Y. What is the matter with this story anyhow, Polly? When I read it over in cold blood, it doesn't seem so very bad. Perhaps I'm not able to judge impartially, but it really seems to me quite as good as a great many other that are printed and paid for.
You'll see that will be taken yet,
said Polly.
Marjorie's Mistake went to the Youth's Guide this morning,
said Prue one day.
It is the last of the Ys. When it comes back again, I shall add the rejection slip to my already extensive collection and make a scrapbook of them. Then if, at any future time, I should, in a moment of madness, be tempted to write a story, a look at it will save me.
2 weeks later, the story was home again.
Put it and my dreams of literary fame into the wastebasket together, Polly,
said Prue, tossing the crumpled manuscript to her friend. Polly smoothed it out and read it over thoughtfully. Somehow she could not quite lose faith in it. She did not put it in the wastebasket, but instead she tucked it away in her trunk. The winter was over by this time, for the travels of Marjorie's Mistake had extended over several months. The terminal examinations were drawing nigh, and after that vacation plans had to be made. Polly and Prue were talking about them one evening.
Are you going anywhere on vacation, Prue?
asked Polly, who was skimming through the columns of an illustrated journal before settling down to study.
Not a place,
said Prue dolefully.
I shall just have to stay at home and poke around. Not because I'm needed, but simply because cash is such a scarce article in our big family. I'll tell you what I'd love to do if I could, and that'd be to attend the Summer School of Science at Long Harbor in August. It is such a help to anyone that wants to be a teacher, they say. And Long Harbor is a lovely spot, but it would cost $20 for 4 weeks abroad and $5 more for fees. I might as well ask for the moon as for $25 to spend on that, especially after wasting so much of my substance paying postage on Marjorie's Mistake last winter,
concluded Prue with a laugh. Polly didn't laugh and didn't even answer. She was reading something very intently. Once she looked up at Prue and seemed on the point of speaking. Then she changed her mind and folded her paper up with an air of resolution. A month later, exams were almost over, and only a week of the term remained. One evening, Prue got a thin, yellow envelope. When she opened it, a slip of folded paper and a typewritten letter fell out. Prue glanced over it and looked amazed.
Polly Shafford, what on earth does this mean? Listen, Miss P.L. Stewart. Dear Madame, we are pleased to inform you that your charming story, Marjorie's Mistake, has been awarded first prize in our recent competition, in which many hundreds of stories were submitted. We enclose herewith our check for $50, being the amount of the prize offered. We are having the prize stories printed in a pamphlet form for distribution among our patrons, and will forward you a copy in due time. Yours very truly, the Excelsior Baking Powder Company.
Hurrah!
cried Polly, whirling about the room.
I knew it. I was sure of it.
Polly Shafford,
cried Prue, catching her in her fifth gyration.
what did you do? I never sent that story to any prize contest, and what has a baking powder company to do with it?
I suppose I must confess,
said Polly, sobering down.
You mustn't be vexed, Prue. A month ago I saw an advertisement in a paper that the company would be giving a prize of $50 to the best short story that would advertise the merits of their baking powder. It occurred to me that your story was very suitable, plot and all. I knew that there was no use to ask you to send it after you had forbidden me so tragically to ever mention it to you again. So I just copied it out, word for word, a sentence here and a relative to baking powder, signed your name and sent it off. I wasn't going to say anything if you didn't make the prize, but it has, you see.
Prue went off into a peal of laughter.
To think that my literary ambitions have come down to this. But, Polly, this prize is really yours. I can't take it.
What nonsense! Prue Stewart be sensible. Why, I didn't do a thing, only copy out the story and put a bit of shop here and there. Of course you take the prize. If you don't, who will?
Well, look here,
said Prue.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll take this money and go to Long Harbor in August. Both of us. Now, don't say you won't, because I'll tear the check up if you don't. Part of it is yours by right.
After a good deal of argument, Polly agreed to this, and they laid their plans enthusiastically over that magic bit of paper.
I suppose you'll be writing another story now, since you've had such good luck with this one,
said Polly as she climbed into bed that night.
Not I,
said Prue promptly.
I've come to the very comfortable conclusion, Polly Shatford, that I am not a genius at all, and that the editors and the great reading public are not waiting breathlessly for the productions of my pen. When I come back next term, I am going to study hard and systematically and give up my daydreaming. I can be a good student and teacher if I can't be a great writer.
Well, I'm glad you wrote one anyhow,
said Polly drowsily.
And you know, I always believed that that story was a good one.
The Adventures of a Story by LM Montgomery.
Hey.